That really is what gives meaning to what we do at the corporate office, especially on the science side. It can be really easy to be in the lab and basically just say, what's the next project? What's the next project? What's the next thing I got to figure out? And being able to hop on these calls, go to events and really hear people's stories, really what brings meaning to the science for us at corporate. You guys are loved and appreciated, and thank you so much for everything that you guys are doing to share Asea. As Debbie said, there's been lots of questions around stem cells, peptides. What are they? How do they compare to redox signaling molecules? Right now is an interesting time in health and wellness. There seems to be a real push. It's kind of started about a decade ago towards this personalization of healthcare and of kind of wellness and tailored solutions for individuals based on their genetic makeup or on their unique needs. And peptides are kind of an expression of that, right? You see all of these different peptides being generated right now. And the reason for that is peptides have a very specific function. They work through a lock and key mechanism. And what that means is the peptide has a very specific shape. And the reason for that is peptides are made of multiple amino acids chained together in different ways to create a different shaped molecule. And based on the shape of that molecule dictates what lock and key receptor they fit in. And so peptides are hyper-specific in their application, meaning they do one thing. They fit in that one lock and key, they signal that function in the cell, and that's how they work. A stem cell is a little different. A stem cell is a live cell. It's called an undifferentiated cell. So when cells are made, babies are growing in the womb, there's a high level of stem cells, and these stem cells grow and then they are differentiated, select what type of cell they're going to be. So they're able to become a cardiovascular cell. They're able to become a muscle cell. They're able to become different types of cells. The benefit of that, of a stem cell, is if you were to apply them to a localized region, they're going to differentiate themselves like the cells around them. And so you're able to provide a localized treatment to allow the regeneration of cells that perhaps are not doing what they need to be doing in a localized region. Redox signaling, probably the one we're most familiar with, given our engagement with Asea, work through the genetic pathways. So they don't work through a lock and key mechanism. They work through signaling. They work through cellular communication. I like to refer to it as cellular intelligence. Again, a cell doesn't have a brain. It doesn't decide what's going on. It's more of like a machine. If there's an input, there is a output. Depending on the input will dictate what the output is. And these redox signaling molecules are able to provide the inputs necessary across all of the genetic pathways to allow the cell to function as it needs to in an optimal way. This is done through this idea of energy, through this idea of redox potential. The redox potential is kind of let's call it the encoding of the message. And the cell is able to utilize that energy and perform functions across the genetic spectrum. If I were to encapsulate everything that I just said here, redox signaling molecules are extremely high level. They're upstream of everything because they work at the genetic level, they work across the genes, and there's a cascade effect that comes down from that across genetic function, across cellular function. So they're very broad in their application. Stem cells are probably the next highest as far as upstream goes. In fact, stem cells in a lot of ways will use redox signaling as they differentiate and as they grow because of the mitochondrial function. The generation of energy is related to redox signaling molecules. So even stem cells will utilize redox signaling molecules during their differentiation process. But those stem cells are capable of differentiating according to the cells that are around them. And then probably at the bottom of the upstream category here is peptides. Again, peptides are those chains of amino acids that have created a specific shape and fix to a specific lock and key receptor, which triggers a specific function. GLP-1 is latching to a specific lock and key receptor that generates hormones that suppress hunger. There are specific functions for peptides. You go all the way upstream, you have redox signaling molecules. Downstream of that, you have stem cells. And then down a step from that, you have peptides. And the reason it's important to understand this is for whatever reason, within the health and wellness space, there is a this or that mentality. I can't do this because I'm already doing that. That cannot be further from the truth with redox. Because redox is upstream of everything, it has a positive effect on all of the other modalities that somebody is utilizing to optimize their health and wellness. It may be true that, and again, I'm not like an expert on peptides here. I understand at a mechanism standpoint how they work, but it may be true that if you're taking one type of peptide, you maybe don't want to mix it with another, right? Depending on which lock and key mechanism they're targeting with each peptide, that may be true. That's never going to be the case for redox. Because redox plays upstream of everything, you can stack it with other modalities. If somebody says, hey, I'm already using stem cells, why do I need Asea? Well, because stem cells utilize Asea and redox signaling molecules to differentiate. So you're going to have better outcomes when you stack Asea on top of stem cells. I'm already on peptides. Why do I need redox signaling molecules? Well, it's awesome that you're using peptides to stimulate that specific receptor that leads to the outcomes that you're wanting. But what are you doing to support your health and wellness from a systemic perspective, right? You're really focused on this one aspect of health, but if you're not supporting it around all of the other systems of the body, you may have an incomplete health and wellness, I guess, or you may not reach the outcomes that you're wanting to. So layer Asea with it. And so because Asea works so far upstream of all of these other modalities or all these other products, it's really easy to stack and really see the synergistic effects. And so hopefully that helps a little bit. Just a quick explanation, maybe not so quick, of the difference between redox signaling molecules, stem cells, and peptides. And one example specifically that you could use with GLP-1s, for example, those types of peptides. A lot of times what we're seeing now is that GLP-1s, while they're super effective in reducing fat content in the body or reducing body mass, it's doing it through appetite suppression largely. And what happens is people who are on it for an extended period of time or have a lot of body mass to lose end up suffering from some of the effects of malnutrition because they're not eating as much. And if they're not really conscientious about the foods that they're eating while they're on GLP-1s, they can suffer from malnutrition. One of the things that's important to note is, well, the first thing is supplement, right? Take a multivitamin, take a green supplement. The VIA line's amazing for that. But the other thing is redox signaling molecules will make your body more effective at absorbing the nutrients that you do put into it. That's one example of with GLP-1s, yes, there are some benefits to them, but there are some difficulties that have to be overcome, and redox can help address some of those difficulties.